Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to make two Christmas cards, both using Strathmore watercolor cards, acrylic paint, stencils, and napkins. The napkins both come from ninniesnapkins.com and you just saw one of them. So this watercolor card is awesome to work on, but I want a border around it. So I'm using my painter's tape and trial and error, trying to get an even white border around the card. I like the look. The other card we're going to do differently. So you're going to get two different ways that you can use napkins and the same supplies and get a different effect. Now I'm keeping track of where the fold is, and you can see I've written on this foam core where the fold is, just in case I need to know which end is up. Depending if I use some word stenciling or stamps, I may want to keep track of that. So I'm pushing that down so I don't get any bleed under. But because I'm using this medium-bodied Liquitex Basics paint, the chances of that happening are slim. If you're using craft paint, it might be more watery, it might seep under, so you want to make sure you have a good seal. I'm using green, yellow-green, and light blue permanent, and I'm just applying with a makeup sponge. It almost dries instantly, which saves time. So when you're making cards, this is a really quick way to get color on the cards. Now I want to add a little bit of detail, so I grab my darkroom door script stamp. Links to this, the cards, and any of the stencils that I have will be in the description box below in one of my various affiliate links. Now I wanted to deepen the color, so I'm adding a little bit more. I believe this is Amsterdam green blue, just to add that little bit more depth of color and interest. And then because I've fallen in love with smooshing, I put some of that green blue on the acetate, spray it with water, and I'm going to smoosh on top. This is going to give that watercolory look. And it's very unpredictable and random, and I'm really embracing that part of it. So I am now going to grab this other napkin, and this one's Poinsettia, and I am going to peel off the back layers and glue it onto copy paper with fluid matte medium. Now I was showing you the color wheel there. I was showing how the background colors and the color of the poinsettia are opposite each other on the color wheel, which means it's going to have a lot of energy. It's going to really pop, and it's going to look really, really good. So when you're matching focal images to a background, use your color wheel. So I'm gluing the matte medium down. Now there were little bits of interest. There were those stamps on this napkin. There was script. I cut those off of here, and I will use those. I will glue them down onto another page down the road. They are not going to waste. So while that's drying, I'm switching to preparing the napkin for the other card. Again, removing both parts of it, both extra plies. Now I was going to put it on that one, but I stamped the script on the wrong way. So then I had to change my plan, and there's lots of changing as I go with this, but you got to roll with the punches and just keep going. Now I was going to glue this down onto the copy paper, just like I did the other napkin, but I realized because the birdhouse is white, any color that I put behind it is going to show. So this is where I'm going to water cut. I'm cutting off the excess, and my plan is to glue this onto the card to preserve the colors. This is not going to waste. I'm going to glue it down to the card before I colorize the background. So the reverse of what I did on the other one. And because the card is so light in the background, any of the excess that I can't get out is just going to go very translucent and you're not going to see it. I love the look of this, the colors in this napkin. So I glued it down. Once it's dry, cutting off the excess, making sure everything's adhered. Now I put the matte medium on top and onto the watercolor paper. And there's a problem with that, and you're going to see that later. I told you I would have to solve problems. So I'm grabbing the poinsettia, and I'm cutting it out. Now I leave it together and then gradually I cut it smaller and smaller and the parts because I know that I can build my own composition on the card depending. And remember I did two sections, two quadrants of the napkin? That gives me extra. And here I'm going into the second one and cutting out a bigger poinsettia because I just felt that it's going to look better on my card. So here I'm just playing with the composition. I could put it on this side, there's so many options. But now I want to add more detail to the background. So I grabbed this poinsettia stencil from the Crafters Workshops. It's one of their new ones. And I'm grabbing white gesso. You can use white paint. And I'm getting very little on the makeup sponge because I don't want it to seep under. And I'm stenciling this. So I'm going to have the poinsettias underneath and then the focal image with the red poinsettias on top. Now, because we're putting this on top of the script, we're just knocking everything else back. Thought maybe I don't need to do more, but then when I tried out my focal image there, I figured, no, I'm just going to continue doing this across the whole background. And I'm loving, loving, loving the look of this. And as I said, as you go, as you finalize your decision making about how you want your focal image to look, how you're going to set up the composition, you're going to continue to cut things apart or cut things off. You can edit it as much as you wish. So there was an awful lot of playing around with this and an indecision on my part. I left it in because that's part of the process. Then I decided I wanted to add some of that red to the background, and a great way of adding a little bit of that color without too much hassle or no supplies at all, just thin some red paint and splatter. That introduces that color to the background and makes everything work together. Now I decided I wanted to edge the insert of this color before I took off the painter's tape. I'm using black acrylic paint and my angle brush. And once that's dry, I'm going to take off the painter's tape. Now, quick tip, if you use a heat tool on the tape, it's less likely to pull up paper. I also take the painter's tape and I stick it on my jeans or my sweater to get some fuzz so it's not quite as sticky. I absolutely love how my background works with that white border. So let's build our focal image. And I want the focal image to overlap where that white border is a little bit, like it's spilling out. If you didn't have a poinsettia stencil, you could put another floral stencil or a stenciling in white that a star, some shape that resembles your focal image. So I'm gluing this down with gel medium and making sure that it is completely adhered. Here I'm shading around the focal image and I'm going on the paper and then I'm going to go on top of the poinsettia. And I just do a little bit here and there just to add a little bit. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can skip this step. The napkin, because it had the matte gel medium on top, it is non-porous, so it's not going to bleed through the napkin. I wanted to deepen the color of the poinsettia, so I grabbed my Inktense blocks and I'm just adding a little bit here and there just to make it a little deeper in color. This is different than when I use gesso and the acrylic paint and get that painterly effect. This is less scary and easier to do. And here I'm adding highlights with the white gesso. And I always use less, where I may do a lot or almost all the way around it with the black for shading. I do less for highlighting. I went into my stash of Christmas sentiments and I found this joy one. And I'm going to stamp it on tissue paper because I don't think I'm going to get very precise stamping onto a card. This way I can make sure I get a good stamp. I have a mouse pad underneath and I do get a good stamp. And here I'm using fluid matte medium to glue it down, put a generous amount under and off over top. It goes translucent and it helps that the background is fairly light. A quick dry. Then I grab my Sakura Glaze black pen and I'm just outlining it a little bit. The Sakura Glaze, if you're not familiar with it, is wonderful for adding detail, for outlining. It is dimensional and it's glossy and it's very opaque. and wonderful to use. So I grabbed the gold paint, and after I spilt it all over my tabletop, I did splatter it on the card. I got a big blob there. So I'm cleaning it up a little bit with the baby wipe. And I can do that because there is that matte medium on it. And I'm going to set that aside to dry. So now we are going to put the background color. And I grab my Naples yellow, yellow oxide, and white gesso. And I start painting the background of this for this card. And you can see on the right side how the paint isn't taking properly. Same thing on the left side. That's the gel medium or the fluid matte medium. I just pointed to it. It is not taking because the gel medium is interfering with the colors. So I don't like the way that this is looking. So I continue on and I switch to a makeup sponge. And now I know I have to add more stamping or stenciling or something to hide that. And note to self, if I glue it down before the paint, see the first one we put the paint first and then we glued it down so there was no interference. This one, you'd have to make sure that you didn't put any of the gel medium, get it on the watercolor card. So I grabbed this Vineyard stencil from the Crafter's Workshop. It looks like holly leaves, and it looks like the leaves that are around that birdhouse. And I grabbed the yellow oxide and I'm stenciling through. In hopes that this is just going to hide the inconsistency of the paint coverage but behind it. And it did a not bad job. I can still tell, but it's not as noticeable. Now my background here, I'm thinking it got a little darker than I was intending. My other thought for doing the background would have been to go in a very light blue, so it was like the sky. You could also have done like a Christmas tree. I decided to do a little bit more stenciling, and I grabbed a brown here. I believe this is burnt umber. And I just bumped the stencil a little bit so it was in a different place. And now it totally camouflaged the inconsistency of the paint. I'm edging it with that brown. And trying to keep the inside of the card and the rest of the card clean by cleaning my work surface. But as you can see, that's a losing battle with me. So now I want to add color to my focal image. I'm adding brown where there's brown, red where there's red, green where there's green, and I'm using my liner brush to do that. And as you watch this, I hope you see the difference that it makes. Part of the reason I needed to do this is because my background got so dark that it's really competing with the focal image. But I'm not really getting that painterly effect. It's kind of between a wash and that. And I'm thinning down the paint a little bits. If you see the paints that are in these little containers, I was at the end of the tubes, so I cut my tubes opened and squeezed out all the paints, scraped it all out, and I keep them in these little containers. It's just too hard to get out of the big tubes at this stage, so this is what I've done. But it's just regular Liquitex or Artist Loft medium body paint. At the top, the cutout only had a little bit of that red ribbon, so it was looking floating like in air, so I included that. Afterwards, I thought this kind of looked like a Christmas ornament that could be hanging on a tree, so I would have done the background all green or green and blue like a Christmas tree. Using the fine liner brush, there's a little scroll work here. Using the liner brush with black. I'm just bumping up the color just a little bit. And now I'm painting all the green in, and I'm using Hooker's green as well as that yellow green, mixing it on my brush. The leaves are probably closer to that painterly effect where I'm just kind of globbing on the paint. I got terribly close to getting all that paint on the card, so I'm taking a minute to clean up. My tabletop is a solid glass surface, which is awesome for cleaning up paint. It cost $100 to get the sheet of glass to put on top of it, and it was so incredibly worth it, except for the glare in the videos. You can see how adding the green leaves here just really made it pop and stand out. That element was lost after we added the background color. So with this one, we had to solve a lot of problems. Right from the beginning, it didn't go on the background that I had planned initially. We had a mistake with the gel medium acting as a resist on the watercolor paper, but in the end, we saved the day. But I'm not done yet. I think this card was definitely challenging. So this is my Making Marvelous with the Discarded art journal. And I have some leftover paint and I am going to add it to one of the pages. So I flip through. This one's reading very vintage. I'm just going to tape off the other side and I'm just adding the paint. We don't want to waste anything. I will be doing a series where I'm finishing these art journal pages, or they may end up being masterboards over time. But the goal is to use the discarded. Here I have some white gesso and I'm just adding that to this page. So I just flip through the pages that I have and either start a new page or add something to an existing page. So these pages, these are going to be accidental art journal pages. They're going to evolve over time. I'm just kind of flipping through to see I've got some red paint Where can I add it? Where can I add it? And this one I have scraped gesso on, and I'm just going to add that. I've got a little bit of yellow on there, and I had some of that blue-green that ended up getting transferred on there. And I thought, you know what? Let's just go with it. So we're going to end up with the red, and then there's some of that blue-green's going to come in here too. The gesso is going to serve as a resist. It's going to take the paint differently. I don't have a lot of paint, but when I go to finish this page or add on to it, I can add more red or more blue. I can match, I can beef it up, because at some point I will finish the page. You can see the blue, you got white. This is simply the first or second layer. Second layer, I guess, is gesso would be. So back to the card. I'm covering up the back of the card because I want to splatter this with a little bit of the Hooker's green. So I'm diluting with water and using my fan brush. Now I'm shading around it, and this just really made a difference. It made it very antique-like, just that little bit of black edging there. Yep, got the paint on the card. And then I'm shading around some of the parts of the focal image as well with that black. So I decided to stamp the sentiment, and I got my stamping press out because that should help you get it exactly in the right place. So I get one and I think, okay, I'm going to do it again. And I don't know how I managed it, but it was offset a little bit. It wobbled. So I got kind of an overlap. It's still readable. My husband could read it. So I think it's still okay, but I just laughed at myself because, who can, you know, make a mess. So there are the two cards. I love them. I will be sending these out. Decide I'm going to use my Posca pen. Oh, that one hasn't been started yet. Just to put some line work on here. I've got close-ups of the cards at the end. Go through your Christmas napkins. If you get a pack and you have lots, you can make a whole set of the same ones. I've got lots of that poinsettia one, so I will be making more of that now that I've figured out how to do it. I can do it assembly line. Same with this one. I mean, with the napkin, you have 4 images to doing it. Thank you so much for joining me. Give me a thumbs up if you'd like to see more Christmas cards. Leave that comment in the comment section. Until next time, go get creative.